Hello and welcome to the Friday night edition of Animal World Live with me, Brent and Wium, and we're going to be discussing some very serious topics, and that is the topic of big cats in captivity throughout the world. Okay, we had a little crash there. We're not sure what happened, so straight into it. You're live with me right now. Let's see who we've got. Hello, Dana. Hello, Yebo, Mimi, Linda, Vicky, Dov, Noel, Annie, TD Kid 1, Cookie B, Vicky, JS, Wild UAE, Stuart Hoy. Oh wow, we got so many people here. So great to have you all here. Thank you very much, Rutherford Clan. Kalena, nice to have you here. Leopardess, Barbara Russell, and Joubert. So great to have you all here. Scott, Bry on the go. Yes, we're going to be brying very shortly after we've had our Animal World Live. TJS Widget, Yvonne Moore, Mary the Lurker Barker, nice to have you. Jordan, hello. Fareed, welcome. Arena, hello. So of course it's quite a difficult subject, but we're going to discuss our live cams before we jump into the very serious subject of big cats in captivity throughout the world. And we have been blessed with some very wonderful live cam sightings over the last little while. And one of the first to come visit is one of our favorite big cats, and it was one of the Rietspreyed lionesses. Okay, so there we go. And I've just heard recently that they've been spending a lot of time there. We've been out getting all sorts of fun things ready, and CEST, as we predicted, is going to become busier and busier as we move deeper into the dry season. So it's always great to catch the lions. It also always helps us to go find them when we know where they've been. So very, very exciting stuff having them on the live cams. And of course, they get very thirsty, which means they probably have a kill nearby, which I found out tonight they do. They've actually killed a giraffe not too far from CEST. So we've had a few visits from the lionesses drinking. I think we had another visit the next night, possibly. And yeah, so it was quite nice to have them again. And I think that kill's not too far, so we could be expecting the lions more and more over the next few days. So hopefully on Tuesday, we were going to be seeing some more lion clips on Animal World Live. Now, of course, when the lions kill something big like a giraffe, we get other predators coming around. And I think this is a first for our CEST camera. And we got a wonderful little black-backed jackal coming to visit, and showing a little bit of nerves, and that's possibly because the lions have been around, and making sure there wasn't a lion in ambush on the other side of the waterhole. So always wonderful to see them. They are definitely one of my favorite small carnivores, and it's always an absolute pleasure to see them, and especially when they don't know they're being watched, so we can see their wonderful behavior. And you can see, being small, you got to be sharp. You never know what might be lurking close by. So yeah, wonderful time to see the jackal. First, I think it's a first for our CEST camera, getting the jackal. Oh, thank you so much, Boo. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Boo. I've got both. I've got my folder and my tablet. I've got multiple notes at my folder and my tablet, so I can see your questions, and my folder so I can just make sure I don't get my facts and figures right. And then we've got running order and my monitor all going off on the right. So lots to keep an eye on. And of course, right behind me, not far away, is CritterCam. And CritterCam always catches some of the really cool little stuff because of where we are. And one of our favorite little creatures is our resident pair of grey duiker, or Grey's bush duiker. So they came to have a visit and got surprised by one of Wium's favorite animals. So the duiker we see very frequently around the CritterCam, and you can just see a slender mongoose slinking by, and we get some amazing shots of slender mongoose on CritterCam. And this particular one was very kind because it snuck past the duiker and then decided to come have a drink much closer to the camera. And you can see how sneaky they are and live they are as they just wander in. And I'm pretty sure all the squirrel alarming I hear quite regularly out the back of the house here is not from my darling Chloa, but most likely from the slender mongoose. Okay, so it has come to that time, and I've got some of your questions teed up here. So before we get into the questions and stuff like that, we're going to just have a quick general chat about big cats in captivity, wherever it be. And of course, the Tiger King documentary by Netflix has drawn a huge amount of attention to the big cat issue. However, with Tiger King, it focused more on the human individuals that were involved in big cat breeding, big cat selling, cub petting, the apparent rescue of big cats, and all sorts of other things, and focused less on the predicament that faces the cats. Oh, porcupine. Was the Diker visiting? We often get porcupine come visit us as well. Craig spotted something behind me. Is it moved off?
Yeah.
Moved off. Hopefully we get a porcupine visiting. There we go. Thank you again to Lead Lenser for the epic torches, so nothing can hide from us. So we're just going to chat in general about big cats, big cat numbers worldwide, big cats in captivity, and then we'll delve into a bit more of the meat, so to speak, about that. So there is only really one official website where you can get correct stats and figures, or the most correct stats and figures on wild animals. So we've used the ICUN website to draw our facts and figures. It is a bit more difficult when it comes to captive animals, and depending on what you read and where you read, the numbers vary, and a lot of the animals obviously not registered and people don't know that they're there, so it is quite difficult to predict. But we'll start off with the US. There's estimated to be anything from 10 to 25,000, probably closer to the 20,000 mark, but no one is 100% sure. And when I'm talking about big cats, we're talking about lions, tigers, jaguars, leopards, and mountain lions. Now, for the focus of the show, we're going to stick to the sort of two biggest cats and the most prominent cats that people seem to keep, and that's tigers and lions. Well, I think we might get a visit from a porcupine, to see if it interrupts my train of thought again, but it's still quite far away. I thought I heard the little rustle of quills. So in the US, tigers estimated to be as little as 5,000, possibly as much as 9 to 10,000 tigers in the USA. As I said, it's very difficult to get correct stats on this stuff. Lions, no one actually has idea how many lions there are in the US, so it's quite perturbing. In South Africa, there are anything from 9 to 15,000 lions in captivity, and tigers, we're not sure how many exactly, so we don't know, to be the honest. And again, it's quite difficult to get facts and figures on that. I think I have to answer. I think I lost Wium in my ear, and I can hear beepity beep. I have lost Wium. Okay, I must. Okay, I've got Wium. Wium, do I have you back? I have Wium back. Okay, so that's just the facts on the captive animals. Now, in South Africa, estimated there's probably about 3,000 lions. 3,000 wild lions in the wild, and then, as I said, probably 9 to 15,000 in captivity. So it is, again, the captive numbers are very difficult to get real numbers on. Now, I will go through to everyone's questions. One of the reasons I said that you could send through your questions on the email in our last Animal World Live, because it's going to be quite difficult for me to concentrate on what I'm saying as well as read questions off YouTube, but I will do that. But I will also focus on some of the questions that have already been asked on email. So we're just talking about the facts at the moment. Those are the figures. So from the ICUN, there's 3,000 wild lions in South Africa, and there's 23 to 39,000. No one's exactly sure how many wild lions in Africa. and there are 523 wild lions in India. So the Indian population is very small as opposed to the African population. So that is your total lion population, your global lion population. And so as I said, one of the other things, now that we've got the facts and the figures out, we're going to not talk and sort of individually about individuals, but rather talk about the whole industry. I do understand that a lot of you have questions about individuals, and from my opinions you'll be able to glean what my general feeling is on the individuals, and generally quite a lot of the individuals are quite similar. So yes, it is a very, very difficult topic, and I'm going to bring up the first set of questions I got now, if I can remember where I put them. That is not it. Of course, everything moves when you think you've got it all organized and ready. Okay. There we go. No, that is the wrong one. Let us have a look. Here we go. So, we're going to start off with Kathy. Kathy Millets has sent in a few questions, and again, as I said, we're going to try not talk about individuals as such, but rather the industries itself. So in South Africa and in the US, you have two quite similar sort of sides of the captive cat industry. You have the for-profit cat industry, where the people are, well, if I'm honest about them, they're both for-profit, but it just depends on the way they're sold. So you have the sort of roadside attraction, let's cuddle a cub, let's pet a cub, get a photo with a cub, and they charge a fee, a premium fee for extra interaction, swim with a lion or with a tiger, play with a lion cub, have photos taken with them, and that is a very distinct, it is almost circus-like roadside attraction where you can pay to go interact with the big cat, whether it be a cub or an adult or a sub-adult, you pay. Then you have the other type who says they rescue the big cats from organizations like that, and then they keep them in captivity in possibly slightly better and sometimes slightly worse because budgets and whatnot, accommodations, and those are basically your two main types of captive cat industries. Now, before anyone gets upset there, I'm not talking about, well, let's actually, we'll get around to that now. So those are your two main types, and I think Kathy is referring, she says near where we are, as I said, I'm not going to say the names of any places for legal issues. We don't feel like getting sued tonight, but it is possible, and so we've got to be very careful about how we broach this, and it is a very important subject. It says we have a wildlife sanctuary near where you are in Colorado. They rescue large carnivores that have been abused and kept as pets around the world. They rehabilitate them and let them live free, in inverted commas, on their 10,000 acre ranch. The females are obviously doctored, but the males aren't, so their manes will still grow. They have a mile-long walkway above the animals for viewing. It seems like they are cared for, but recently they seem to be collecting animals. Are you familiar with them, and what's your opinion? Thank you so much for your dedication to the wildlife of South Africa and the world. Well, thank you very much for that. So that falls within the second part, and there's some quite well-known figures in South Africa who also fall within that second part. My personal opinion is I'm not the biggest fan of them. Any of those keeping captive cats. Now, I understand these animals have been abused and now they're in a slightly better place. And we just need to as I said, we're going to look at this from a very sort of high level, big picture situation, and it is quite tough and it's quite hard, and sometimes you can't help but feel sorry for the individual, but we need to think about the bigger picture. So I did some research, and a very well known lady who falls within this part of the sphere, the rescuing of big cats from roadside attractions. She obviously has volunteers and says she needs money and whatnot to pay for this exact type of situation, and those big cats well, she says now with COVID and whatnot, and I said this is available on her website. You can go look at it. I haven't gone and found it in some nasty way. It is available on her website, and she is a part of the Tiger King documentary. They say they've lost $160,000 of revenue, monthly revenue, from COVID and the inability to have volunteers and people who come pay to volunteer to help with the cats and stuff like that. Now, $160,000 in Africa is an exorbitant amount of money. $160,000. It's over $1.5 million in a year. So you're looking at about $1.7 million. I know Charles, the mathematician, is behind there somewhere. Actually, why don't you guys tell me what $160,000 is a year, and convert that into just tell me what the total is. So I'll keep a lookout for that. So $160,000 a month is what she says their loss of revenue is. Now, obviously, that's quite a big one. Do we have a technical problem? No. Oh, hi. I just see Charles walking out here. I think there's something wrong that I can't hear him. No, sorry about that. Okay, so I just want you guys to let me know, $160,000. What is that times 12? I'm waiting for you guys anyway. I mean, I can guess it's about 1.5 million US dollars. Now, 1.5 million US dollars to keep a rescued zoo animal in some form of luxury for the rest of its life. Now, if depending on the age you rescue a big cat, the big cats can live in captivity 21 to 25 years old, depending on male and female. So it's a long time. You've got to keep feeding, caring, veterinary bills and stuff like that. If you put $1.7 million into wildlife conservation in Africa and community projects and education, that amount of money will actually go to saving the species, not the individual, and saving populations. $1.7 million you can, and now if you take that, I don't know how many of these organizations there are, but I'm going to say, for example, they're more than 10. So now if we start taking $1.7 million, we times it by 10, we're now sitting over $10 million. $10 million, you can buy a farm bordering Kruger, or depending on the farm, etc., or you can buy a farm bordering the Kalahari that is now being used for cattle. You can open that up. You can now expand the wildlife range and stuff like that. So you start talking $20 million if you start doing the maths on this. And if that money was going to credible organizations like the Endangered Wildlife Trust, etc., who are actually using that money for species expansion projects, range expansion projects, taking land that was previously under other things and moving that money into actually expanding the wild population and into a more viable wild population. So, I mean, it starts getting quite scary when you think about it like that. So, and I said, if we look at the individual, it's always really sad. That animal must have had an absolutely horrid life, and yes, it will have a slightly better life in one of those organizations, although I personally believe a lot of those organizations are not completely truthful, because if you are just covering costs and whatnot, I mean, I don't know, I mean, a lion, say it eats on average, I've done this math, for 8 kgs of meat a day, I don't know, and they're getting whatever meat. It's a very expensive thing. Now, if I take my sort of emotions out of it and I look at it from a completely big picture thing, would that money, all that money that's being funneled into these different programs, not be better funneled into Africa, into India, into Indonesia, where the big cats actually live, in range expansion programs, etc., and would it not be the better thing to euthanize all these big cats that are all over the world? Now, I'm not saying that's what I want to do, but I'm just saying we need to look at the big picture. Now, if we took all that money, and we put, as I said, put it into Africa, put it into the local communities, the community whose lion where a lion eats its cow or an elephant eats its vegetables. That type of money in terms of creating jobs, creating awareness, education, surely that money cannot be better spent on the ground. Now, of course, there are different problems with corruption and all that, but that aside, if you're working through proper organizations like the Endangered Wildlife Trust and Panthera and others like that, much more good can be done for the species, not the individual. And at the end of the day, it's a very hard thing to do, but sometimes you have to look at the safety of the species and how to save the species. And none of those captive animals in the US or in South Africa can save the species. Now, referring back to Tiger King, another big player in Tiger King, whose name we won't mention, but he might run something sort of like a cult. He says he's protecting the genetic diversity of the species with these animals. Absolute nonsense. It is absolute nonsense. The genetics of those cats is so messed up. They're being bred to be white, and then there's another tiger thing I saw one of the other people from Tiger King have. I think they call it a tabby tiger. It's sort of like a dull orange tiger. So it's not a white tiger, it's not a red tiger. The genetics of these cats it would actually pollute the wild population, and a lot of them have lots of different issues from inbreeding and breeding for specific colors. So you want to get a slightly orange tiger, not a fully orange tiger, and you want to get a white tiger. So you're picking all the lightest animals and you purposely breeding them together over and over. So if they went and mated with a wild tiger and were released into the wild, they would possibly bring in a whole bunch of defects, heart defects, liver defects, because they're not active as much as wild animals. They don't hunt, so they've got lots of different problems that might happen. Sorry. So, yeah. There we go, Mars. It's so hard for humans to think of those in macro species terms rather than micro personal connections, and it's incredibly difficult. I get so attached to the animals we follow. I absolutely adore them. But sometimes, again, and you have to step back and look at the good of the species. Now, ligers fortunately can't breed, but I mean, that's just, you know how incredibly uncomfortable it must be for those cats to force a lion and a tiger to mate, or vice versa. I mean, they are genetically programmed to be enemies. Exactly. TD Kid 1, humans have been doing it for centuries. When I talk about the choosing and whatnot, how do you take a wolf and turn it into a multi or into a chihuahua? Because that's what we did, and with domestic cats as well. So, are we going to get there with big cats? I hope we never do. Mars, that is a very interesting thing. We actually have looked at something like that in the past. Okay, now we're going to go to the biggest problems facing big cats in the wild. Now, I want you guys to tell me, what is the number one biggest problem facing lions and tigers in particular in the wild right this very moment? So I'll wait for you guys to answer. So what do you think is the number one problem that is facing big cats in the wild? In the meantime, I've just got to bring up something over here. Now, while I'm waiting for your answers to come in, I'm just going to discuss something that in the media, the public media, a lot of very well-known and renowned news channels, personalities have covered and focused, including people who are now considered taboo because of Tiger King, have featured in Rolling Stone, they've featured on CNN, they've featured on PBS. Some of those animals that were used in movies that you've all watched: Ace Ventura, Operation Dumbo Drop. I'm trying to remember the others now, but again, lots of those animals have been used in movies, and it was all condoned. So the one thing I will say for Tiger King, even though it focused more on the people rather than the animals, is that it's fact that it has brought a huge amount of awareness to the captive cat industry worldwide. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So we've got quite a lot. Poaching, territory, decreasing habitats, loss of place to roam. So all of you, place shortage due to diminish habitat, habitat loss, humans, poachers, genetic diversity and habitat loss, man-human conflict. So strangely enough, poachers and poaching, again, affects the individual on the short term rather than the bigger species. But by far, the biggest threat facing big cats worldwide, wherever they might live, is lack of land and loss of land. So, and a lot of there was something that happened today that I'm sure a lot of you know about, and I'm not going to go into any detail, but I'm going to put a scenario out. You have a fenced reserve. It is big enough to carry lions. Actually, no, I'm going to get into this a bit later. Actually, I know, I suppose it does tie in nicely. So you have a fenced reserve. It's got a population of lions. Now, you want the lions to live as natural a life as possible, mate, have cubs, but now you do not have another influx of other lions. And again, this is a theoretical possible thing that might happen. So you have a fenced reserve, you have a population of lions. You have females, they have cubs. You have a male. The cubs and now get to the age where they are sexually mature, and the only male lion in the reserve is their father. Now you've got to bring in a different male lion if you want to breed and whatnot. And what generally happens is they slow down the breeding through various different things. Generally, a tying of the tubes, and then if you want to breed again, that process is easily reversed. So on the females. So now you've got a male lion who's old. In the wild, 15, 16, he'd be dead. And you've got his daughter's now reaching sexual activity, and he's so old now that he's not really the greatest lion. He's just around and he wanders around. Now you've got a couple of different scenarios here. Now what do you do with this male lion? He's done his job. He's past his prime. He has created babies. And in the wild, he probably, in an open system, because he is in the wild, he's in a big fenced area, in an open system, he probably at this stage would have been chased off and killed by other lions. But now, because it's a fenced area that used to be cattle farms or whatnot, but is now a game reserve, you've got a problem to face with these lions. What do you do with them? Now, this is something that a lot of people don't understand. South Africa, its wild lion population, with the wild space that is available, is very good and very stable. There isn't more space. You can't put him move him to another farm. He's now too old as well. He's not really a good lion anymore. He in the wild, he would have been, in an open system, sorry, not the wild, in an open system, he would have been killed. Now, you are faced with a couple of very difficult situations here. Do you move this lion that's been living in 20,000 acres into one of these places that looks after animals so they can live their life out peacefully and die of old age? Because lions generally don't die of old age. Lions die a violent death. That's just part of their nature. Do you call in a vet and euthanize him? Or do you, and as I say, it's a very, very controversial topic, do you sell that off to a hunter who will pay an exorbitant amount of money, which then brings money into that reserve for conservation, for anti-poaching, to bring in other lions, etc. Sorry, Vim? So as I said, it's a very, very, very difficult situation. Now, there's another scenario. Okay, he's getting old. You bring in another male lion, a young male lion in his prime, to kill him the natural way. What do you think happens then? He runs to get away from that other male lion as much as possible because he knows he's not in the state to fight him, breaks out, gets into the community and kills someone's child. These are the sort of realities that people are facing in trying to expand lion populations and rewilding areas that weren't. There is a point where you get too many lions. So it is a very difficult decision and very difficult scenario to be faced with as a landowner. There we go. Having a lions only game reserve, someone said that somewhere. That won't work because you've got to feed them. You've got to have food for there, and any single species game reserve is a lack of biodiversity, and it's not a working system. And as I said, these are all hypotheticals, and they're all difficult conversations to have. However, one of the reasons we do talk about this stuff is that a lot of people won't talk about it. It's much easier to pretend everything is okay and nice, but in reality, there are 4.5 million people right here on the edge of conservation areas where 80% of them see no benefit from a conservation area. So a dead lion for bones to sell to China, or a fur or a rhino horn is a far more important and far more valuable commodity than a live lion. We obviously don't see it like that. But you've got to realize that a lot of people like to look at Africa with rose-tinted glasses. And I'm afraid there are some very harsh realities and very difficult decisions that people have to make and don't want to make. And they get judged very harshly without people actually finding out the real information and digging into it. Okay, I'm just going to get some questions here. I'm going to grab some questions out. I see there's a lot. So I said, sorry guys, I know I'm not going to be grabbing as many questions as I normally do. There's quite a lot of stuff I need to get through. R. Just quickly, I actually forgot to mention that earlier. So R. Move him to an accredited zoo. I assume you're saying move him to an accredited zoo. SSP of breeding of threatened species with a very strict database, managed corporate institutions, best genetic to preserve the species. Okay, we don't need those in South Africa. We've got 3,000 wild lions. If you take the cost of now moving a lion from here to America, it's astronomical. The amount of work you could be done with anti-poaching or community-based projects and providing work would heavily outweigh the cost of moving a lion from here to a breeding facility overseas. Now, speaking of breeding facilities overseas, there are, particularly in the cases of things like tigers, where there's less than 3,500 tigers left in the wild, there are accredited zoos that are doing a job in terms, and other zoos with different endangered species, where they are maintaining genetic diversity and have very strict rules, like R.L. Moore is talking about. A great example of that was used recently by African parks. There were black rhino, a subspecies of black rhino that occurred in Rwanda and Uganda, and obviously before they were all extinct. A lot of those rhinos, some of them were moved to South Africa, some of them were moved to, I think it was Germany, and they were bred under strict genetic rules that they didn't crossbreed with the other subspecies, the southern subspecies of black rhino. And then when Rwanda got to the stage where it was ready to reintroduce those black rhino into the park, they managed to get those back from the zoos and they were reintroduced into Akagera National Park. So yes, there are zoos and stuff that do play a very important part in the maintaining genetic biodiversity of threatened species. However, we're not referring to those type of zoos and etc. in this conversation. Okay. LR or more. Have those who want the lion not killed sponsor a responsible retirement for old lions. Again, you're taking away money from the species for the individual. It costs a lot of money to keep a big cat. Electric fences that have to be massively high. You've got to feed them. You've got to maintain vet bills. It's a lot of money for the individual that doesn't hold benefit for the species. That is the problem. And as I said, we're talking big picture here, and we've got to be and it's really difficult. As I said, I really grow attached to the different individuals I follow and spend a lot of time with and get to know their personalities. But a lot of these decisions that people criticize and get shot down for in the media and whatnot are not made on the individual. They've got to make big picture decisions on saving the whole species. And if one male lion who's 17 years old and past his prime is not going to be saved, but you can save two young males that broke out of Kruger because there was lack of space, because other big males have pushed them, they've been pushed out of their pride, and ended up in a community of 1 million people eating cows, goats, and possibly people. You can now take those lions and move them into his place and take the money that you would be using to have a retirement village for lions and actually take new genetics from wild lions that are being pushed out of their natural habitat because there just isn't space left. That is the saddest thing. Tigers face the same problem. Leopards to a degree as well. Jaguars. Any of the big apex predators face that problem. And of course poaching's a problem and not. But the biggest problem is there's not enough space left for them. There we go. TD Kid 1. The big picture starts at the bottom with people. Now, let's just be clear. In that scenario I was doing, it wasn't canned hunting at all. That lion was in 20,000 acres. It had never been hand-reared and fed. Canned hunting is a completely different thing that comes from the captive industry, the cub petting industry, more than. So lions are dangerous animals. They will kill you if they get the opportunity to. And a lion that is tame and has grown up with people is 10 times more dangerous, 20 times more dangerous than a wild lion. I will walk into thick bush tracking wild lions. I won't get out of a car or in an enclosure anywhere near a captive lion. It doesn't have its natural fear of humans, and it will kill you. So the canned lion industry is a completely horrible thing. But again, it is almost a spin-off from the cub petting industry. If we didn't have any captive cats, there wouldn't be any canned lion hunting because there would be no canned lions to hunt. So if there weren't any captive cats, and the money that is going into the captive cat industry, whether it be for the cub petting industry, whether it be for the lion retirement fund industry, that money was going into range expansion projects. So I see my dad said there are only two open systems in the whole of South Africa. It's the Kalahari, which is open to Botswana, and then the Kruger. Now, it's open to a degree that there are massive areas, but eventually, the edge of those areas, you're also going to hit people. I mean, the Kruger, the western side of the Kruger is fenced because you hit people. And then it's open to Mozambique in certain areas, but as far as you go in Mozambique, you're going to hit people eventually. You go north into Zimbabwe, you're going to hit people eventually. So there is no more space. The lions cannot naturally migrate through to other areas anymore. So it is almost our responsibility that we have to, in some ways, manage them. And there's an incredible group that I know the Rietspruit Game Reserve is part of, which is, I've gone blank on their name now, I should have written it down, which manages the lion population of South Africa as a big picture population. So it is, as I said, a very difficult thing. There we go, as my dad says there. The wildlife managers and owners of these reserves have to take, and in terms of national parks in particular, they have a mandate from government to maintain biodiversity rather than the individual species. So you might see a lion that is incredibly badly wounded. The Kruger National Park's got a lot of lions. The Kruger National Park population of lions is not under threat. It's going to cost a lot of money to bring up vets and fix it. He might not survive. Okay, we're going to shoot or euthanize that lion. So again, you've got to remember the people are looking about the bigger picture, and it is very easy to get focused. There we go, called the Lion Management Forum. So it is very easy to get focused on the individuals that we grow to love and care for. However, sometimes we need to take a step back, as I say, and look at the bigger picture. Leopardess, yes, humans are to blame, but we can also be the solution. And sometimes being the solution means we've got to make some hard decisions and take some make some tough choices. Okay, let's have a look. Buy land through non-profits for preservation and exploitation of sustainables. Coast cider. So what I'm saying, that's to say, I'm saying all that money that is going into lion retirement funds, lion retirement fund, but or the cub petting trade or the canned lion hunting trade. If there were no captive animals, we wouldn't need all of that. And if there was a magic way, and I know it's an impossible ask, that we could fund that money into non-profits like the Endangered Wildlife Trust and engage in range expansion. And unfortunately, that for that range expansion to happen, whatever that land is being used for, now you can't move people out of their homes to make space for lions. The people of the countries of Africa and North Africa have a right to be there. They also live here. And as you expect to be safe in your house, and you expect your government and your police to do their jobs and etc., it goes for the same. People expect to be safe at their house. They don't expect a lion anymore to be wandering around in their garden. There's some of us who choose to live like that, but that is a choice. Most people will not choose to have big, dangerous, scary animals like lions and elephants wandering around in their homes, or near their homes and their children in their garden. Pam, we could, if you brought younger lions in and let nature take its course, what would happen is a fence is only as good as the motivation the animal has to get out of it. In 9 times out of 10, the animal doesn't have enough motivation to get out of it. If you brought younger lions in to let nature take its course in a fenced reserve, almost certainly that older male would escape through the fence rather than facing those lions, would face the electric fence and then be out into possibly a community or a cattle farm and pose a threat to human life. Rosemary, I completely agree. We want our children to see these animals alive and not as a stuffed taxidermistry. But again, to do that, we need to make the hard decisions and look at range expansion rather than looking after captive lions that have got past the sell-by date. Erlene, we're not going to talk about people individually, just from fear of legal ramifications. In my opinion, whether you be part of the rescuing of big cats from bad big cat places or a bad big cat place, I still feel you both sides hold quite a lot of responsibility. And again, if you remove the emotion and you look at the big picture and take away the individual, I believe that if we could shut down all of those places, it would probably be best, and that money gets funded. As I said, it costs a huge amount of money, and people donate a lot of money and pay a lot of money to go to those type of places, the good and the bad. And if somewhere we could channel those that type of funds to people like the Endangered Wildlife Trust and the equivalents in India and Asia and South America, and work on range expansion programs. My dad gave me a very good example using another species. Exactly, Danny. So to give you a very good example on a very similar problem, but it's a lot smaller and much easier to get. Mountain gorillas. I've forgotten the exact date, but there are only about 700 mountain gorillas. Their biggest problem is not the population. There's enough of a viable population to grow there. Their biggest problem is a lack of land. People live right up to there. Now, the other thing is you've got 700 plus NGOs all fighting for the same money to save the mountain gorillas, to stop anti-poaching. Not one of them is looking at land expansion. Well, there is now, but I'm saying in general, most of them are not looking at land expansion. And a lot of the NPOs or the funds or whatnot, unfortunately, a lot of the money never gets to the guys on the ground. It's lost in admin and gala dinners and whatnot. Okay, so I've got a bit behind here. Tom, it's a very difficult one. I know the money speaks. I know the money speaks, but instead of feeding the drive of trophy hunters, can we not humanely euthanize? You can most definitely humanely euthanize. However, and you've got to look at something really real in Africa, and that is that people don't have money and access to huge amounts of money, and humanely euthanizing is going to cost a couple of $100. However, if sold on to someone who wants to shoot a lion, I have absolutely zero interest in any of that. You can get $50,000-$30,000 US. That pays people's salaries, that pays, it builds schools, it does a lot of things. So again, there's no one right answer to any of these questions. And I think the real answer is that we can't just have one stand. There needs to be a coordinated plan, and people need to have a look at the bigger picture. And I think I must stop saying bigger picture because I've said it too many times. Okay, let me just have a look here. Sparrow, that America has a few natural reserves that receive retired zoo and all rescued animals, allow them to live out their lives. As great as that is, would this form at least part of the solution? Possibly, but that one, for example, and I didn't have to dig hard, says those places for retired animals, they were losing $160,000 a month of revenue from people coming to visit the retired animals. So I mean, and the cost of keeping those animals is just it's astronomical. Fences, maintenance, meat, staff, etc. So if that money could be channeled into where it's really needed, which is on the ground in Africa, I unfortunately think that it's probably better if those animals were euthanized in a humane way. This is my personal opinion, and it's taken me a lot of research and reading and whatnot to come to this. But if we could somehow channel that money into, as I say, range expansion, make a bigger area for lions, there can be more wild lions, and we wouldn't have a need for captive animals at all. Now, I mean, to give you an example, we'll use Mozambique because I've got those figures and facts in my head from the rhino poaching. In some of the communities bordering the national park, Kruger National Park, and the Transfrontier Park in Mozambique, you have people who are living on less than $500 a year. So imagine $160,000. Imagine $10,000 going into one of those communities. It's life-changing. And I mean, it could be simple enough as putting a borehole in, because people might be walking kilometers to fetch water. We turn on a tap and we've got water. And now, if we cannot, through range expansion and upliftment of the rural communities that live with the wildlife, it's very easy to sit somewhere where you don't live with animals. You don't have the risk of a leopard taking your child or a hyena eating your child. These people live with this real risk. And if there's no benefit for them to have these animals and it's just a risk, they are not going to protect them, and they are going to poach them, shoot them, kill them, poison them. Exactly. If money from canned hunting went straight back into local conservation efforts, it would not be so bad, just unethical. Exactly, but it doesn't. It is a for-profit. It is a greedy industry. Mars, I completely agree. This somehow needs to be more accessible to the human population who are around it, in terms of being able to enjoy and experience the animals and whatnot. However, when you are battling to survive, you're not thinking about enjoyment of an elephant walking past you, thinking, my goodness, that elephant is going to eat the maize that the maize that I have planted, the corn that I have planted that's supposed to feed my family through the winter. So yes, unless there's a real tangible money, a financial profit to these local communities, whether it be from tourism, and in some circumstances hunting, it provides a greater wild space for the greater population to live. Applehead Rob, let's stop talking about these things and come up with a solution. I agree completely, but the first step to the solution is talking about it, and getting a lot of people to understand the harsh realities that are out there. That I think a lot of people in the world who are very harsh to condemn actions by African conservation organizations, African national parks, private park owners and landowners, don't have all the information before they make their judgments, and it's very easy to get brave on a keyboard, but I'd like you to go speak to a family whose child has been killed by an elephant or a lion, and tell them that the elephant or lion is more important than their child. If you can do that, and that is a harsh reality that a lot of people have to face out here. And no, you can't go shoot that elephant, you can't go kill that lion, even though it has just removed the most important thing in your life. Yeah. As my dad says, the captive lion exists because there is a market for it. There's a demand. So people going to look at captive lions is the market, is the demand, and until we don't have people going to look at captive lions, I'm very sad to say we're going to have captive lions and leopards throughout the world. No, well, it's never as simple as that. In the perfect simple world, possibly the best answer for the captive lions would be to euthanize them, and the funds that would have been used to keep them and etc. and whatever were funneled into viable African projects. African Parks is another great one that is doing an incredible amount of work in saving species and land expansion. EWT, Panthera, and again, the other issue comes in that there are a lot of those save the animals and organizations where the money doesn't actually go to the right place. It gets spent on all the wrong things, and mostly salaries of people sitting in New York or London, and not to the anti-poaching ranger on the ground or to the school teacher in the community. So it is quite a difficult thing. Danny, completely agree with you. The annoying thing is the idiots on Instagram, Facebook that make out like they're saving these animals have a huge following and donations. They've created a monster. I mean, I can do this quickly here. There is an individual who irks me beyond words. As I said, I've just got to be careful about what I say from a legal standpoint. But I have mentioned him in the past before, and I will just go onto Instagram here quickly, and I'll type in Endangered Wildlife Trust as an example. Endangered Wildlife Trust, who has amazing diverse number of projects. Cheetah expansion, lion expansion, wild dog expansion, riverine rabbits, Pell's fishing owls. And I mean, there's so many different projects that they go on and they fund and they struggle. They've got scientists doing real work, real data. On Instagram, the Endangered Wildlife Trust has 9,679 followers. A banker from Switzerland who decided to play with lions in South Africa, I do not follow him, so I actually have to, has 7 million. That is the sad reality. The Endangered Wildlife Trust that has, I mean, go look at their website. They're at least 10 pangolins, rhinos. They're moving species that have been wiped out in countries before, like wild dogs and that, reintroducing them back into those countries. 9,000 followers. A Swiss banker who moved to Africa, bought a little farm, and likes to roll around with captive lions, and was in trouble recently for punching one of them. I'd also punch a lion if it bit me. They got teeth and claws. It hurts. But I would never put myself in that situation. Has 7 million followers, has a fund me page, has a bunch of different things. So isn't that absolutely, it's disgusting actually. And there's another one of those, I think that one has got even more than 7 million. There's a terrible place in Mexico. What is it called again? 7.2 million, and they constantly have cubs and all sorts, and they have celebrities, well-known celebrities, who are going and posing with these animals and having their pictures taken, and I think in a lot of cases, a lot of the celebrities, and I said the education is not there. They think, oh no, this guy says I'm going to give him some money and it's going to go into conservation. Having lion and tiger and jaguar cubs in Mexico City is doing absolutely squat for the greater good of the population, in my opinion. I have to add that, otherwise I can get into trouble. There's a Russian guy, as I say, there's a massive thing. So I think the best way to combat the captive industry is through education. There will always be bad people. That is a fact of life. There will always be people who will take advantage of animals of other people. And I would like to believe that a lot of the people who get conned into cub petting and etc. do so because they don't know any better, not because they are bad people. I truly believe that. I just think that there isn't enough light shone on these industries. Now, of course, we've just focused on big cats, but I mean, it goes to reptiles, the pet industry, another absolutely horrific industry with wild animals. Captive birds from the Amazon, from Africa. I know of a person, I actually know of a person who in South Africa brought baby caiman back in his luggage to sell in the pet industry. Brought a baby caiman, a crocodile, in his undersea luggage, in the luggage you stow in the aeroplane. So there are always going to be those type of people, and they always tend to gravitate towards the same places. However, you walk into a pet shop, and he was selling them to pet shops here. You just need to stop the trade and the cuddling and whatnot, and the only way to do that is through education. Okay, guys, it's been emotional, but it has been great, and I'm sorry if I haven't got to all your questions. As I said, it's quite difficult. I've now lost everything again because I am an idiot. Sorry. So yes, and of course we're going to be having these conversations, and they aren't always going to be easy. And I appreciate everyone coming into these conversations with an open mind, and even if we don't agree on certain things, at least we can discuss it like adults rather than name throwing and being nasty. And I think the only way we're going to my fire is dying, so the smoke is getting worse and worse. I'm so sorry about that. But yeah, it is one of those things, and we will keep having these discussions. We will keep creating education about these different issues. So thank you very much for joining us on Animal World Live this evening. On a slightly happier note, we did mention a while ago that the incredibly talented Brian Joubert, who was part of the Killer Bees when we were at Safari Live, is designing new t-shirt and hat and hoodie and what other wonderful swag you can get on Teespring. So I think sure Charles or someone will pop up a link now. You can go have a look. So Brian's been doing some fantastic work. He's an incredibly talented designer, and he's designing all photographs of your favorite characters. So there's a Melita pack design out, and there is also a Rietsbreit male lion design out. So go have a look at those, and let me see. And of course, a big thank you to all of you for joining us and for sitting through here, to Led Lenser for the amazing torches and the lights up in the sky that are making me look so wonderful this evening, and of course to our patrons, who we wouldn't be able to bring you these discussions without, and our super chat sponsors, thank you again, and of course and to all of you out there, and thank you for joining us and watching us, and we'll see you on Tuesday for a slightly happier episode of Animal World Live.